Bhargav from Financial Express, and Latika has very graciously already told us about Mr. Banga, and obviously he needs no introduction. He's the executive chairman of Mastercard, and we obviously everyone knows Mastercard. So, sir, to kickstart this discussion, I would like to talk about COVID-19 pandemic and the challenges that we have ahead. We're just emerging out of it, and now we are facing some new hurdles.
Thank you for asking me and accommodating my schedule and time. I really appreciate it. I have looked at you guys doing this kind of event over the years, and I'm very pleased that you continue to do it despite all the challenges of going virtual. So that connects to the COVID-19 life, right? We've all sort of learned how to deal with this crazy life with these little boxes on a screen as compared to what we've been so used to. Look, first of all, I would say this pandemic situation may be over, but the endemic situation will stay with us for a while. And so you should be prepared, as you see even now in parts of the UK and the US, that this thing comes and goes based on variants, right? And I think we've got to be able to find a way for society to live with that as compared to shutting down everything and not being able to manage. And I think the miracle of science that gave us these mRNA vaccines, hopefully this will enable us to see this phase through as well. The problem is, I don't think this is the last pandemic. And so in addition to the geopolitics, which you just referred to, which is obvious between the earlier circumstances of already a widening trade issue between China and the US, but now you've got the whole Russian-Ukrainian circumstance, which I think is leading to a very complicated world in that space as well. And then we've got inflation, right? And the fact that central banks that have over the years been very accommodative in their monetary and fiscal policies as governments as well, because of all that we've been through over the last few years, we've frankly had a 10, 12, 14-year uninterrupted run since the last financial crisis of 08, 09. And I think you'll see corrections on that as well. So the Fed in the US has already made clear that it's going to be tightening as well as raising rates. And in fact, now the speculation is not about when they will raise rates, it's about how much they will raise them by. And I just think what you have to remember in that one topic, and we'll go back to your main question, is that even if the US Federal Reserve rate were to reach, let's say, 2.5%, 2.75% by the end of the year, which is what some people speculate. But if inflation is above that rate, let's say inflation comes down from today's high, they think March was the peak, and let's say it comes back down. If it's above 2.75, even if it's 3.5% to 4%, we still have negative real interest rates in the United States at the end of the year, or what the implications of that are for next year as well. So I'm saying all this to you, I think the pandemic, geopolitics, inflation, these three external factors, and then there's a couple of other things, right? There's technology and what technology is doing, this whole dealing with the new industrial age of whether you call it Web 3.0 or the circumstances of the economy 4.0 or whichever words you want to use. This AI-powered, technology-powered age has its own implications for every company and for every individual. So I think the concept of growth for the next few years has to be looked at from that perspective. And my view is that you will certainly, probably sometime next year, because this year, the momentum is still carrying through a lot of stuff that's going on in the world. I think you will certainly see the impact of oil prices, inflation, geopolitics, the pandemic, all this coming together in some way over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. And in my new life in private equity, I kind of talk about this as, what Warren Buffett once said, that when the water runs out, you'll know who was swimming naked. Because you will figure out who took risks and offered prices and took valuations that probably weren't justifiable with the actual truth of their model and their growth. And I think fully financed business plans, some rationalization in asset prices, and therefore a opportunity for strong companies to get even stronger and strong economies to get even stronger through vertical and horizontal consolidation. That's what I think the next 2-3 years holds for us. And I think India is very much a part of that. India has to play what it sees as the role in that circumstance. And the advantage India has is it has a fairly strong domestic consumption market. Now, that goes through its ups and downs, but exports are not what India relies upon only for its growth and development. that gives India a more diversified sort of foundation to manage through the next 2 or 3 years. So I think you have to look at global growth in that context of a volatile, uncertain kind of world, and you have to look at India as being a relatively strong player in that world.
I understand your point, and I completely agree with you that India is a part of that. And now sticking with India, and we have seen tremendous growth in digital payments and UPI payments. I think in March were around 9.3 lakh crore, which is a phenomenal rise if we compare it with over the years. So, and how do you see UPI as a competitor to various cards such as Visa, Mastercard, American Express? How do you see Visa as a competitor in this day and age?
I mean, it depends what you define your competition as. We have card in our name, but we're really just not a card company. And I think it's like tell people all the time, Apple actually is a fruit, but nobody ever asks Tim Cook whether he sells apples. And Amazon actually is a river in Brazil, which is far more consequential to our world than the company Amazon. But does anybody ever ask the CEO of Amazon that? So you're doing the same error, in my opinion. I think you're assuming that we're a card company, and I think you should get past that in your thinking to what we actually do. So for us, first of all, we're a multi-rail company. I'm indifferent whether you pay by a card or you pay by a real-time payment system. UPI effectively is a kind of real-time payment system from a bank account to a bank account or any rail to any rail. And I think companies like ours, which are in the business of facilitating payments, we don't really care whether you pay with a bank account or a credit card or whether the form factor is what people get tied up in. But I don't think that matters. What matters is that we as a company, my old company, no longer where I am, but that company is keen to be in the flow of payments, wherever they come from and wherever they go, paying in, paying out, both consumer to business, but also business to business and government to people and all these different flows that are actually very inefficient even today. And I would say while UPI has grown, I don't think it's a secret that India is still a very strong cash economy. And I think that you guys all have to remember that. A lot of folks in India tout around what UPI is doing. That's lovely. But you got to remember, there's a long way to go for India to actually get out of the cash economy and into a modern digital economy. And the Prime Minister has driven this idea from his first day in office. And I would say, to an extent, even the prior government did a lot of work on the kind of fiber optic laying. And in fact, if you think about Aadhaar, the work started, 15 years ago. And Aadhaar is the foundation of a lot of the digitization of payments. But I feel like you've got to just remember there's a long way to go. And in that long way to go, this idea of one competitor versus the other is actually the issue. You're going to need all these different players at the wheel in order to drive this forward, because the forces against digitization of payments are essentially very strong too. And they are tax avoidance, they are frankly illegal activity, they are all, and this is true, by the way, of all countries. Don't for a minute think this is about India, this is about the world. The world is still 85% in retail payments cash. So this issue of tax avoidance, infrastructure, the way the illegal activity happens in any country, cross-border and within a country, these are the factors against which the players who are trying to convert to digital are pushing against. See what I mean? So my attitude from day one has been, we can all argue about the 15% that is digital globally, or we can start working on the 85%. And if you do the math, growing in the 85 is far more attractive to a company than fighting for share in the 15. So long answer to your question, I find UPI interesting. One more solution in the long fight against cash.
As I was saying, something else that India has done and many other countries are doing around the world is data localization, which has been gaining speed. So how do you see that a balance that can be, a seamless balance between the movement of data in a protected environment for greater benefits for its analytical point of view and benefits of data localization in terms of protection?
So I think this whole data localization debate needs a lot of light shone upon it, right? What are you trying to do at the end with data localization? If you say what you're basically trying to do is to protect your citizens' right of privacy, then help me understand why that data should lie on local servers if somebody locally can get access to your data. What is privacy? Is it only privacy of protection from a foreign national, or is it also privacy of protection from your own government and another Indian business entity? What exactly are we discussing? And I think that's a debate that India's citizenry need to think about, because that gets obfuscated in this nationalistic fervor in a country that gets talked about, hey, my data is going overseas. All right, it's going overseas, and what's happening with it? If you're take a look at vaccines, mRNA vaccines, they would never have been developed without the cross-border flow of data on how this was done. And if you study it, you will learn that is the truth. Similarly, let me ask you this question. If a plane is flying through the sky and it's collecting data while it's flying through all the sensors it has on the different elements of climate that are going on, is that data, does it belong to that company? Does it belong to anybody there? Does it belong to the country it's flying over at that moment? Or is this data that could be very well used for climate change prediction and for weather predictions that would benefit Indian farmers and European farmers? Just as a question to you. Similarly, cybersecurity. If a thief has figured out a way to break into a bank in Taiwan, and you're able to recognize that pattern by using that pattern and applying it to Indian data, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And so the question really is, what form of data and what protection do we really need to do for our citizenry? And I think protecting an individual's privacy is sacrosanct. And there I completely agree with every government that wants to give you, like the GDPR concept, the European Data Protection Law, a right to know what's being collected about you, a right to be forgotten, a right for you to understand what is being done with that data, and for the company to feel the burden of keeping your data safe and collect the minimum amount that it should. These were the principles that Mastercard as a company also laid out very clearly. But when you go past that to getting into this thing about data localization, I worry that you're forgetting the real principles of privacy, which is to also protect you from anybody else, even domestically, knowing all they should about you. In what form? Unless you want to give them access. That's your real privacy. And I think that is being lost in this debate. So I would rather reframe the data debate to one of privacy, managed the right way. And therefore, whether the data stays on soil or it goes outside, either way, it should always protect the consumer. And so it should be anonymized. It should be managed in a way that people cannot access it. It should be used only with your consent. You should go very easily and say, I don't want my data to be kept with you to any company without having to navigate some 15 pages of privacy disclosures that nobody understands. And it should be the responsibility of the company that collects the data to minimize what it collects about you, to only collect that which it needs. So if a weather app on your phone starts looking for your contacts on the phone, even if that data is kept in India, why is that a good thing? You see what I mean? I think we've got to reframe this debate to the real debate about the privacy of people like you and me as compared to just the cross-border. I appreciate the cross-border debate as well, because there's a national security element to your information being allowed to go outside of the country. That I completely understand. But anonymized versions of your information that may enable better weather pattern prediction, better climate prediction, better cybersecurity protection, better analytics for you as a consumer, why is that a problem, whether it's done outside or inside? That's the issue. Now, having said that, governments are sovereign entities. And I'm very respectful in my prior role of the fact that governments will decide what they want to do because they're allowed to do so for their country. That's their job. It's their role as a government. And multinationals have to respect that and try and do the best they can, given what the government says and does. You can engage with the government in a dialogue. You can help inform them and have an argument with them. But once they decide, it's their law, it's their government. You know what I mean? And being respectful of that is also an important part of being part of civil society. So again, don't get me wrong. One of the things I've learned over the years of working globally is you're allowed to have a point of view, but you must respect what people locally want, because that's the meaning of glocal, as in global thinking, local execution, right? And I think that is the key to being a global citizen.
point is that it needs to be transparent and it needs to be used for a larger social good. If we can use that, then data collection has to be.
Or even for your good as an individual. If I offer you better services as a result of this, if I offer you better pricing, more transparent views of what people are charging from you, I as in whoever the company is, but I do it in a way that respects your privacy, meaning I don't take your data and churn it and send you back an offer, but I take anonymized data and I send back anonymized offers to certain kinds of people, then why is that a bad thing? And by contrast, so I think there's a bigger debate here about privacy and protection for citizens. Why do you use Siri on your phone, on your Apple phone? Or why do you use a speaker when you know newspaper articles will tell you that people are recording all that stuff and actually writing it down? Why the hell do you use it then? Why do you have Siri open in your house? That transparency and that simplicity. And I think rightly so, governments have to start thinking about how to recast the situation to make it better for you. That's, to me, the bigger debate on data. It's not about local versus it's about this.
I completely agree with your point on I was using the Amazon speaker. I have my Alexa right here, and I asked this question interacting with this, with all the issues involved around this.
Yeah, there are none of these. Even Siri is turned off on my, and that's because I'm a little more informed about this because of my years of service with cyber systems and parts of the commissions in the US. I don't do any of this. Unfortunately.
So, coming back to India, most of the startups in India right now, if you look at them, they are coming in the fintech space. So what, according to you, are the reasons and what advice would you like to give here for all the startups that are coming into the fintech?
I think India has benefited enormously from this infrastructure and this move of inclusion. And that's why all these fintech players have come up. My advice to all of you in the fintech space is to think beyond just a bank account and a payment. I think like table stakes. And if you see where the puck is going, in ice hockey, there is a statement that you skate to where the puck is going, not where it is. A bit like if you're in soccer or football, you got to run to where the guy is going to pass you the ball. There's no point standing where you are right now. Not going to do much. In the same way in business, I think you have to skate to where the puck is going, run to where the ball's coming. And to me, the next big turn in this space is software as a service methodologies in which payments and AI are embedded as natural services. Because my view in life is that nobody gets up in the morning dying to make a payment. But that's not what you get up for. You get up to lead your life, to go to work, to meet your girlfriend, your spouse, your children, your parents, to go out for a movie, to go out for dinner, to have a drink in the evening, to go play a game of soccer, to go play squash, whatever it is that makes you happy. To study, to do a good job, to be a good human being, to go serve somebody, to go to a temple, to go to a gurdwara, to go to a mosque, whatever makes you happy. You don't get up to make a payment. Neither do you get up in the morning to take a payment. Even if you're a dukandar. You don't just go there, I'm here, what a great day it is, aaj main payment lunga. And so you get up because you're trying to create a life for your family. And so I think payments have to be not the end. Payments have to be the zero friction middle of the other things that people really get up to do. And that, to me, is where the future of innovation is going. So think about it in terms of, imagine if and people are beginning to do this in India and elsewhere, so it's not a new idea, but I'm just putting it in context for you. Let's say you're a law firm. And today, if you look at law firms in India, of which there are plenty, their billing management system is antiquated. At best, it works off some software they can get from somewhere. Then they have to chase you for the payment. Then you send a check or a wire transfer, and then they have to reconcile that. वो फिर पूरा नहीं आया, वो उसको chase करो जी, उसके 50,000 रुपए रह गए हैं. This carries on endlessly. Both the payment, the billing, the reconciliation and the collection, but then also how you pay your lawyers and all the inside system, as well as the management of appointments and the time used of each lawyer, and therefore how the allocation of payments happens. There are people building these software as a services, which enable all this to happen seamlessly. And in that is built appointment management systems, collection systems, payment systems, which allow multi-rail, the point we started with, not just card, but UPI or any other system. And those kinds of innovations to me are very sticky, because now you can attach all kinds of AI to it to make it easier for the firm to figure out whom to chase down first, what kind of business they were more likely to get, extend that to restaurants. And now you get a table management system, a tipping system, a waiter payment system, a cook payment system, a collection. You know what I'm getting at? A loyalty program, a cross-selling system. So you can, this idea of software as a service, built with open APIs, in a way that in which payments and AI are embedded merely as friction removers and as enablers, as compared to fintech being the only answer. This to me is at the next click of the wheels.
Staying in the digital world and the fintech world, in 2021, Wirex was the first cryptocurrency platform that was allowed to directly issue payment cards on the Mastercard platform, I think. And more of those have been granted now. What potential do you see for crypto to grow without the government's backing in this day and age?
I am not a big fan of unregulated crypto, personally. So what do I mean by regulated, unregulated? First of all, I think that governments around the world, just as we were discussing on data, that they have the right to decide and have a sovereign nature of their business. To me, the social contract between a government and its citizenry comprises 4 or 5 things: security and safety, a currency, an identity, and a right to certain quality of life in their country. And a currency is very much a part of that. I can't see governments allowing private players to run their own currencies outside of that system. I think it breaks the social contract in a very fundamental way between a government and its people. And so, to me, the real issue here is, what are you trying to achieve with crypto? First of all, we're not discussing blockchain right now, although we could. But blockchain to me is, again, an interesting fundamental infrastructure technology. Crypto is one use of that. And within that, the Bitcoin type, which has sucked all the oxygen out of the room, is the least interesting to me. When you get to a stable coin, you begin to get closer to what I think is possible. And finally, you may well end up with a central bank digital currency. Although I would argue that UPI has made the rupee digital anyway. But, a central bank digital currency mandated and regulated by the government. And to me, that's the spectrum. I'm most comfortable with the CBDC, which then has to decide what is the level of engagement of the Reserve Bank of India with its citizenry. Will you have a 2-tier system with commercial banks in between? Or are you talking about you opening an account directly with the Reserve Bank? I think that latter has got all kinds of challenges in terms of monetary policy, managing safety and security, managing a run on the banks, all that. It's a nightmare to think of. But if you maintain a 2-tier system, then I think stable coins and central bank digital currencies are both quite interesting. Meanwhile, what you'll see my old company doing over the last couple of years is basically enabling those cryptocurrencies that are willing to play within some rules of the game on KYC, AML, transparency of business model, and so on, and heading towards a stable coin. We've engaged with them. We even engaged with Libra, then Diem, which was Facebook, because they were talking about becoming a stable coin. But we could not find with them clarity on KYC and anti-money laundering and compliance with those rules, and a clarity of business model, meaning they wouldn't use your data to make money as compared to the payment itself. You know what I mean? We were uncomfortable with that. We're back to my issue of data and a citizen's privacy. I just consider that to be a sacrosanct right of yours as a citizen. And so that made us pull out. So I would say this is not about Mastercard, because there's a new CEO, and he and I have known each other a long time, but he's there because he's there for a new role and he's going to think about this. But I think the company basically thinks in terms of playing along the middle line on compliance and rules of a country, along with protecting a citizen's right to privacy and therefore transparency of. If crypto gets to that, well, then there's something interesting. The problem is, what problem is it really solving? That's what I don't, that's where ultimately the rubber will hit the road, right? If this is basically a technology looking to solve a problem that people perceive, but not adequately. So as an asset class, it's fine. You want to buy currency and you think money down, okay, that's okay. You should do it. It's fine. But not for payments and keeping your bank account. Because now you cross an asset investing situation to basic stability of the financial system. And I think that's going to be the interesting issue that needs resolution over time. Now, blockchain is interesting because to me, one of the biggest advantages of blockchain and some of these cryptos is the programmable nature of that currency. So the amount of data that can go with it, which helps in reconciliations and cross-border payments may be highly facilitated by that data reconciliation capability. I think that's very interesting to me. But the idea that somehow cross-border payments will only be cheaper with crypto, I don't agree with that. Cross-border payments pricing is a function of competition. If India's central bank switches, UPI and other NUE that they set up, connects directly with the central bank real-time payment switch in Singapore, tell me why you cannot have movement from Singapore to India, account to account, at a much lower price instantaneously. You can. And real-time payments already exist in India with UPI, and they already exist in Singapore with its system. Why not simply connect those two? And so I feel like, there's a lot that can be done without undertaking the additional challenge and risk of know your customer, anti-money laundering, business model transparency, building a new economic system, fiscal policy, monetary policy risks that come with this complete new idea. That's kind of my personal opinion. This is not Mastercard's opinion. This is my opinion I'm giving. And remember, I don't speak on behalf of Mastercard any longer. Huh? I left on 31st of December.
I wanted to circle back on something that and I just remember that you had a discussion, panel discussion with Mr. Piyush Goyal some years back, I think, and you said that now it is also the time to not just think about financial inclusion, but inclusive growth. Do you think that India is taking that step at this point of time?
You remember that panel when I was joking with Piyush about this? Yes, I remember. It was somewhere in Delhi. I'm trying to remember where we were. But actually, I think Piyush is one of the smart guys who gets it as well. So my point I was trying to make there was that merely giving somebody a bank account is not enough. You have to encourage them to use it in a way that enables them to build a credit history and get access to insurance. You're back to where we started our discussion, right? And that led to inclusive growth. And inclusive growth goes beyond financial services to things like health and education. Access to clean water, power, that creates health and education. And if you think about your Prime Minister's speeches, he talks about caring about quality of life and jobs. I mean, if you translate everything he's saying, it is all about quality of life and jobs. And so what he's talking about is exactly this, because you can't get quality of life and jobs without inclusion. That's why he's so focused on it. Similar, so I feel like there's a lot of progress happening. I think getting credit and insurance to be available more widely. Some things they have done, like if you open your account with Jan Dhan Yojana, you get access to a certain amount of health insurance at the very minimum, right? So certain steps have been taken. But I think the insurance space in India is still relatively small and can go very far. Everything from crop insurance for farmers to the kind of insurance cover that the average individual buys for life, for health, for property protection. There's still a lot of growth that is available to take the risk away from all these, from an individual onto a shared entity called a life insurance corporation of some type. I don't mean LIC. I mean insurance corporations of some type. And so to me, India's on a journey there. I'd like to lift this conversation beyond India for a minute and think about the problems of the world. Everybody talks about many issues, and the UN has 17 sustainably development goals and so on. I can't remember 17 things. Right? I find it very hard. So I've translated this for my own purpose into the three sides of a triangle. And the first side of the triangle is the trade-off between one and many. Meaning, if all the benefits of few, then that is not what growth is about. It can happen that way for actually good growth in a country leads to a better raising of the full income profile of the country. Not that everybody will become equal. That's not what I'm saying. You should be paid more for the work you do. I get it. I'm completely a capitalist, but that you lift people with you. So that's the inclusion-exclusion point. And this sometimes you get discriminated against in that process because you didn't have the right education, you didn't have the right color of skin, gender is a problem, your sexual orientation could be a problem in some countries, your access to the kind of education you got, the network you built. Shriram College is a great college with a great network of alumni. Not everybody is good enough or lucky enough to go to SRCC. And so it's not easy to fight this issue. And it shows up in health and financial services primarily as this problem. The other problem, the second side of the triangle, is the conflict of humanity versus nature, which now everybody is talking about as climate change. But it's a much deeper issue of how people treat their environment, how growth is generated, what the life of your children will be compared to yours, clean air, clean water, all that. Is electric batteries the right way to go, given that lithium is a problem and battery disposal is a problem, or is hydrogen the right way to go? I would argue with you that Reliance has understood that. You can see Mr. Ambani's investments in hydrogen. There is a reason. The Indian government has announced great policies on hydrogen. There is a reason. And so people should not get too excited about a battery. Batteries are interesting, but batteries have got enormous downstream environmental consequences. And so I'm not discounting a Tesla, for God's sake, don't get me wrong. The world's richest man runs a battery company, right? It happens to be a car company, but basically it's a battery company. So don't get me wrong on that. I'm just saying we have to think through this out 20, 30 years for that side of the triangle. And then the reason the triangle doesn't fall down is because the bottom of the triangle is the strongest foundation, unfortunately. And that is the trade-off between long-term and short-term. And too many people, politicians, CEOs, teachers, doctors, are incented short-term solutions as compared to longer-term solutions, because that's how their vision works for various incentives. And so I think all these problems, inclusive growth, climate challenges, inclusive growth, not just financial, but health and education, are all a problem that are facilitated by a shorter-term view. And my with people like Piyush is about this, and how the Indian government is uniquely placed to have a longer-term view that enables to take the first risk position, that enables them to create the right policies for these two sides of the triangle to somehow get tackled. And I think there's a lot of progress going on those, whether it's UPI or it's inclusion there, or it's some of the health and education policies that the government is trying to put in, and whether it's to do. Don't get me wrong, there's a long way to go, and there's enough criticism for every government in every country.
So thanks a lot for this insightful discussion that we've had, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and you have given some wonderful insight over the world of financial world, of fintech and policy regulation and everything around that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me and for giving me the privilege of being a part of your day.